The night was heavy with smoke and whispers. The auction hall stood in the center of the alien city, lit with cruel golden lights. It was not a place of joy, but of fear. Every soul that entered knew what was sold here was not goods, not art, not treasure, but living beings. Rows of cages lined the walls. Some were small, barely large enough for children. Others were tall, meant for warriors captured in battle. The stench of fear clung to the air, yet no one spoke of mercy. Only prices, only profit. In the middle of the hall, two little alien sisters were pushed forward. Their skin shimmered faint blue under the harsh lights. Their large eyes were filled with terror as they clung to each other's hands. They were no more than 10 cycles old, their clothes torn, their faces dirty, yet their bond was unbreakable. They trembled, but they refused to let go of each other. The crowd stirred. Voices rose as the auctioneer lifted his cane and slammed it against the floor. Two younglings, strong, rare breed, perfect for labor, perfect for service. We begin the bidding now. The first hand that rose was thick and heavy. It belonged to a ruthless alien merchant. His scales glistened green, his eyes sharp like blades. He was known across the colonies for his cruelty. He enjoyed breaking families, tearing bonds. It gave him power. It gave him pleasure. He smiled wide, showing his jagged teeth. "I will take the taller one," he hissed. His voice carried across the hall like poison. The crowd murmured. Some looked away, others smirked. To many this was entertainment. The auctioneer nodded. "The offer stands. Shall we begin separate bidding?" The sisters cried out, their voices high and broken. "No, please, don't separate us." They wrapped their arms around each other, trembling, the hall filled with laughter, cruel, mocking laughter. And then, in the middle of that noise, a new voice rose, calm, steady, firm. "I'll take them both." The crowd froze. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked in shock. The ruthless alien narrowed his eyes. Standing near the back of the hall was a human, his clothes simple, travel-worn, his face quiet but strong. He looked like no one important, just a worker, just a traveler. Yet in his eyes, there was fire. The human stepped forward, his hand raised. "I'll pay for both sisters together," he said. His voice carried not just words but weight. It was not a request, it was a promise. The hall stirred. Whispers spread like wildfire. A human daring to oppose the ruthless alien. It was madness. It was suicide. The alien merchant leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his cruel face. "You?" he said with mocking laughter. "You dare bid against me?" The human did not flinch. He looked at the sisters, still holding on to each other in fear, and nodded once. It was enough. For the first time since they had been dragged into the hall, the sisters felt a spark of hope. The auctioneer hesitated. Sweat rolled down his face. He knew the human was serious, but he also knew angering the alien merchant could mean death. Still, the rules of the hall were clear. Once a bid was made, it had to be honored. "Very well," the auctioneer croaked, his voice shaking. "The bidding begins. Two younglings, sold together. Who will raise the price?" The hall grew louder. The ruthless alien slammed his fist on the table, his voice like thunder. "I will pay double. No human will stand in my way." The human clenched his fists. His eyes locked on the sisters. He knew he had little. Almost nothing, but he would not step back, not tonight. The fate of the sisters hung in the balance. The first spark of battle had begun. The sisters held their breath, watching, hoping, praying. For the first time in their lives, a stranger had stood for them. One human against a hall full of aliens. One voice against the roar of cruelty. And though the night was filled with laughter and threats, there was something different in the air now. Something dangerous. Something powerful. The auction hall fell into a strange silence. Only the echo of the human's voice lingered. "I'll take them both," he had said, and it still rang in the ears of every watcher. The ruthless alien merchant leaned back in his wide chair, his scaly arms crossed and his jagged teeth stretched into a grin. It was not a smile of humor. It was the smile of a predator, cruel and sharp. His eyes locked on the human, glowing with something dangerous. "You think you can stand against me?" the alien hissed, His voice slithered through the air like venom. "Do you even know who I am?" The crowd chuckled nervously. Some nodded. Everyone knew his name. He was Zalcor, a merchant who ruled over trade routes with fear. His word could break families. His coin could buy soldiers. But the human did not move back. He simply adjusted. His worn jacket, his hand still raised, his jaw clenched, his eyes steady. He looked at the two sisters who clung to each other, and he gave the smallest nod. The girls trembled, but they held on tighter. The auctioneer swallowed hard. His hands shook as he tried to keep control. "The bidding begins at 1,000 credits for the pair," he announced. His voice cracked. He looked from the human to Zalcor, unsure if this night would end with profit or blood. The human lifted his hand. 1,000, he said, calm, firm, almost instantly. Zalcor laughed. The sound rolled like thunder. 2,000, he barked. His tail slammed against the floor, shaking the wooden boards. The crowd roared in approval, cheering for the powerful merchant. The human's face did not change. 3,000, he said. Gasps rippled through the hall. The crowd turned. Some stared in shock, some whispered, "A human with that kind of money?" Impossible, they whispered that he must be lying, bluffing, but Zalcor's grin only grew wider. 5,000, he said smoothly, his voice oiled with confidence. He knew no one could match his wealth. "These girls belong to me, human. You cannot win." The sisters clung to each other harder, their small hands shaking. They did not understand the numbers, but they felt the tension. They saw the cruel light in Zalcor's eyes and the steady fire in the humans. One was death. The other was hope. The human's breath came slower now. He touched the pouch at his belt. Inside were all his savings, scraps of work he had carried across worlds, coins worn with years of labor. He thought of how small that pouch felt compared to Zalcor's fortune. But then he looked at the girls again, their wide eyes, their desperate fear, their bond stronger than chains. He raised his hand once more. 6,000, he said. Auctioneer nearly dropped his cane. The crowd gasped. A ripple of disbelief spread. Whispers turned into shouts. Zalcor leaned forward now, his grin stretched. His jagged teeth caught the light. "You amuse me, human," he hissed. "Do you really think you can save them? You cannot even save yourself. When I finish here, I will take more than your credits. I will take your life." The crowd laughed with him. Some shouted for blood. Some shouted for the human to stop. But the man stood tall, his eyes not leaving. "The sisters, 7,000, he said, his voice louder this time. The hall fell silent again. The sisters' tears glistened under the golden lights. Their hearts pounded. They did not know why this stranger fought for them. But every word he spoke was like a shield thrown over their fragile bodies. Zalcor's grin did not falter, but his eyes narrowed. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He had never been defied this way, not by a human, not by anyone. He leaned closer, his claws scraping the armrest of his chair. "Very well," he whispered, his voice low but sharp. 10,000, the crowd erupted. It was a number no common worker could ever reach. The sound of it crushed hope in the hall. Many shook their heads. The game was over. The human's hand dropped to his side. His face tightened. For a moment, the sisters' hearts sank. Was it finished? Would they be torn apart? But then, the human stepped forward. His boots echoed on the wooden floor. He stood taller. His voice rang out, clear, steady, unshaken. "I will not back down," he said. His hand rose again. 11,000. The hall gasped as one. The auctioneer froze, his cane nearly slipped from his grip, and Zalcor's grin, his ruthless, jagged grin, finally faltered. Just for a heartbeat. The smile wavered, the mask cracked. Behind it burned fury. The sisters saw it, they clutched each other tighter. For the first time they believed, maybe, just maybe, this human could win. The hall held its breath. The battle of coin had only begun, but the war of wills was already blazing, and the ruthless alien's smile, once sharp and proud, had turned into something else, something dangerous, Something unstable, hope and danger filled the air together, and the night was far from over. The auction hall trembled with tension. The human's voice had cut through the noise like a blade. 11,000, he had said, and silence followed. For a moment, the cruel laughter stopped. For a moment, even the ruthless alien Zalcor froze. The two little sisters held their breath, their fingers digging into each other's arms. They could feel the weight of every word, every coin, their lives balanced on numbers they could not understand. Yet they understood one thing. The human was still standing, still fighting. Zalcor leaned back, his scaled chest rising and falling slowly. His grin returned, wider than before, his jagged teeth glinted under the golden lights. "You play a dangerous game, human," he said, his voice calm but cold. 11,000 means nothing to me. I could throw away 10 times that for sport. His claws tapped the armrest of his chair. 12,000, he barked suddenly. The crowd roared again. Voices rose. Whispers filled the air. Some sneered at the human. Some pitied him. None believed he could last. The auctioneer, sweating under the heat of the lamps, lifted his cane and shouted, 12,000 offered by Lord Zalcor. Do we hear more? The human's hands tightened into fists. He reached down to the leather pouch tied at his belt. His heart pounded. He opened it slowly. Inside were old coins, credits scratched and dirty, small trinkets he had carried from one job to another. It was everything he owned. He closed his eyes for a moment. His mind went back to long nights of labor, to days without rest, to scars earned for every coin, and then his eyes opened again, steady. He raised his hand. 13,000, he said. His voice cracked slightly, but it was strong enough. Gasps ran through the hall. Some laughed in disbelief. He lies. He has nothing. One alien shouted, "He is bluffing." Another called. Zalcor's grin thinned. His eyes narrowed. He studied the human like a beast watching prey that refused to fall. Slowly, he leaned forward. 15,000, he said, his voice low, like thunder, rolling in the distance. The sisters whimpered. Tears welled in their eyes. They did not understand why the human risked so much, but his fight burned hope inside them. They pressed their faces together, whispering to each other, "Please, don't let him stop. Please, don't let him give up." The human's chest ached. His pouch was nearly empty. His hands shook as he placed coins onto the table beside him. The clink of metal was soft, yet it echoed loud in his ears. He counted again and again. He knew he was reaching his end. He took off his worn jacket, placed it down, his boots, his belt, even his old knife. He piled them all, anything with value. The crowd watched in shock, murmurs rising. This was no bluff. He was tearing away everything, piece by piece, just to keep two children together. 16,000, he whispered, his voice firm even as his throat burned dry. The hall gasped again. The auctioneer stared. His hand trembled as he wrote down the bid. Zalcor's smile vanished for a moment. His claws scraped the wood of his chair. He hissed softly, "You dare strip yourself bare in front of me? For them, for worthless little creatures." His voice rose. 18,000. The crowd cheered with wild laughter. The gap widened again. The sisters shook with fear. Their small voices broke. "He cannot. He cannot." They cried softly. The human's chest heaved. Sweat rolled down his brow. He looked at the sisters, their small faces pressed together, trembling, terrified, desperate. His fists clenched, his heart screamed inside him. He had nothing left to give, nothing but himself, and then slowly, he untied the chain around his neck. From it hung a small metal disc, scratched and old, a memory of Earth, a soldier's tag, a reminder of a brother he had once lost. His hand shook as he held it. His lips tightened. He placed it on the pile. His eyes burned. He raised his hand again. His voice rang out louder than before. 19,000! The hall erupted into chaos. Some shouted it was madness. Some shouted he lied. Others fell silent, unable to look away. The sisters gasped, their hands covering their mouths. Tears rolled down their cheeks. They did not know what that small disc meant to him, but they knew it was precious. He had given everything, even a piece of his heart. Zalkor's grin was gone. His eyes burned now. His scaled fists trembled. He leaned forward, his voice sharp, cruel. 20,000, he spat. The number slammed through the air like a hammer. The auctioneer's cane struck the floor. 20,000, do we hear more? His voice shook. He had never seen a human fight like this. Never seen desperation turn into fire. The human stood tall, but inside he was breaking. His pouch was empty, his pile stripped bare. His hands bled from holding his coins too tight. His chest hurt with every breath, but still he looked at the sisters, still clinging, still begging silently. He raised his hand one last time. His voice cracked, yet it filled the hall. "Everything I have," he said. "All of it." The hall froze. Silence spread like fire through dry grass. The words were heavier than any number, heavier than coin, heavier than gold. For the first time, Zalkor's grin faded into a snarl. His claws dug deep into the wood of his chair. His tail lashed against the ground. The struggle of coins was no longer about money. It was about will. It was about who would break first, and the human, stripped of all, still stood, still defied, still fought. The air inside the auction hall grew heavy. The crowd was restless, whispers running like fire through dry grass. The human had given everything, his coins, his belongings, even the tag from around his neck, and still he stood, still he fought. Zalkor's smile had disappeared. In its place came a cold glare, his scaled face twisted with anger. His claws scraped across the armrest of his chair, leaving deep marks. In the wood, the sound made the sisters flinch. The auctioneer raised his cane with shaking hands. "The bid stands at 19,000, offered by the human. Will there be more?" His voice cracked. His eyes darted nervously toward Zalkor, afraid of what might come. Zalkor rose slowly from his seat, his height towering, his shadow spilling across the floor like a storm. The crowd fell quiet. Everyone knew what it meant. When Zalkor stood, he did not stand for games, he stood for blood. "You think numbers matter?" Zalkor hissed. His voice rolled across the hall, sharp as knives. "Coins are cheap, lives are cheaper. Do you think I will allow this insult?" He pointed a claw at the human, his eyes burning with rage. "I could buy this hall, buy these guards, buy you, human. Do you truly believe you can win?" The crowd cheered nervously. Some laughed. Others looked away. They knew Zalkor's threats were not empty. He had power that stretched far beyond this room. The human did not flinch. His hands shook from exhaustion. His pouch was empty, yet his eyes did not leave the two sisters. He said nothing. His silence was louder than the noise of the crowd. The sisters clung tighter to each other, their small bodies trembling. They could feel the danger rising in the air. But when they looked at the human standing firm, something inside them whispered, not to give up hope. Zalkor stepped down from his seat, each step heavy, echoing across the wooden floor. He moved closer, his shadow falling over the human. His grin returned, twisted and cruel. "You want them both?" he hissed softly so only the human could hear. "Then you will pay in more than coin." The auctioneer swallowed hard. My lord Zalkor, the bidding—" "Silence!" Zalkor roared. His voice shook the hall. The auctioneer stumbled back, his cane nearly falling from his hands. The crowd recoiled, none dared challenge Zalkor's fury. He leaned close to the human, his hot breath brushing against him. "When this is done, I will break you," Zalkor whispered. "I will take your bones and hang them as a warning. No human defies me and lives. You cannot protect them. You cannot protect yourself. You are already dead." The human's jaw tightened. His fists clenched. He looked up at the towering alien without fear. His voice came steady. "If I fall protecting them." His eyes shifted to the sisters, still clutching one another. "But you will never tear them apart." The crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken to Zalkor that way. Not in public. Not in front of so many. Zalcor's tail lashed angrily against the floor, his jagged teeth bared in a furious snarl. He raised his clawed hand, as if ready to strike the human down where he stood. The sisters screamed, their voices echoed sharp and desperate. But before Zalcor could act, guards rushed forward, spears raised. They surrounded him nervously. "My lord, the rules." "The rules of the hall," one stammered. His voice shook, but the words were clear. "Once a bid is made, it must be honored. The human has offered, it cannot be undone." Zalcor froze. His claws hovered inches from the human's face, his eyes burned with fury. He lowered his hand slowly, his chest heaving. Then he laughed, a sound low and terrible. "Very well," he said, his grin returning. "Let us finish this little game." He turned to the auctioneer, his voice booming. 21,000. The hall shook with gasps. The crowd erupted, cheering his power, his wealth. They thought it was over. No human could match that. The auctioneer raised his cane weakly. 21,000 offered by Lord Zalcor, any more? The human stood silent. His pouch was gone, his belongings stripped, his heart weighed heavy, his breath came ragged. He had nothing left to give. The sisters' tears rolled down their cheeks. They whispered, "Please don't stop, please." The human closed his eyes, his mind screamed at him. He had already lost everything. He had no more coins, no more goods. But inside his chest burned something greater than gold. He opened his eyes. His voice cut through the chaos. "I offer my life," he said. The hall froze. Silence crashed down. The auctioneer's cane slipped from his hand, clattering against the floor. The crowd stared in shock. Some laughed nervously, others gasped. Zalcor's grin widened, cruel and delighted. "Your life?" he whispered. His eyes gleamed. "Then you are already mine, human. I will enjoy watching you crawl." The human's eyes remained firm. "As long as they stay together," he said, nodding toward the sisters. "My life is a fair price." Though sisters' cries filled the air, their small voices broke. They had never seen such sacrifice, never known such courage. The threats had begun. But the war was far from over, and in that hall for the first time Zalcor realized the human was not playing a game. He was willing to pay a price no merchant could ever match. The hall was silent, so silent that even the crackle of the lamps could be heard. Every eye was fixed on the human, every mouth held shut. No one could believe what he had just said. "I offer my life." His words still echoed in the golden chamber. The sisters sobbed, their small hands gripping the iron bars of the cage. They had never heard such words. Never had anyone stood for them in this way. They pressed their foreheads together, whispering, through tears, "Please don't let him die, please." The auctioneer looked pale. His hands shook as he tried to lift his cane. His voice cracked. The rules. The rules do not allow life to be traded." But even as he spoke, he knew his voice meant nothing. For in this hall, the one who held the most wealth and the most fear was the one who truly made the rules. Zalcor's grin stretched wide. His jagged teeth glistened under the lamps. He leaned forward, towering over the human. "So noble, so foolish," he hissed. His voice dripped with cruel delight. "You think honor means anything here? You think these worms care for your sacrifice? No, human, your life is already mine." The crowd laughed nervously. Some cheered, some shouted for the game to end. They wanted blood. They wanted to see the human crushed, but the human did not move. He stood straight, his shoulders heavy but unbroken. His eyes locked on the sisters. His voice rose again, stronger this time. "Together," he said. "They stay together, no matter the cost." The sisters cried harder. Hope and fear mixed inside their trembling hearts. The auctioneer swallowed. His eyes darted between the human and Zalcor. We must conclude the bidding," he stammered. His cane tapped weakly against the floor. "The last offer stands at 21,000 from Lord Zalcor. Is there any higher?" The human stepped forward, his voice rang out, 22,000. The hall gasped as one. The sound was like thunder. No one understood. He had nothing, no coins, no belongings, no wealth. Yet he spoke with such certainty that even the air trembled. The auctioneer froze, sweat dripped from his brow. "But with what?" he whispered. The human's chest rose. He placed his hand on the small pile beside him. Coins, clothes, boots, knife, soldier's tag. His voice was steady. "With everything I am, with everything I carry, with everything I will ever earn." His words struck the hall like a hammer. Zalcor snarled. His grin twisted into anger. His claws dug deep grooves into the wooden floor. "You dare!" he spat. His tail whipped violently. "You dare defy me in my own game!" 23,000, he barked. His voice thundered, shaking the walls. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some screamed. The air was alive with frenzy. The human's fists clenched. His body shook with exhaustion. His breath came heavy. Yet his voice rose again. 24,000. The hall froze once more. It was madness. Pure madness. And yet, his eyes did not waver. His voice carried truth. Zalcor's fury grew. His scales rippled. His breath hissed like steam. He bared, his jagged teeth. 25,000! He roared. His voice broke through the crowd like fire. The sisters clung tighter. Their hearts raced. Every number felt like a mountain crushing them. And yet, every word from the human lifted them, kept them breathing, kept them believing. The human staggered. His knees bent slightly. He looked like he might fall, but he forced himself upright. His voice cracked but still carried. 26,000. The crowd gasped. Some shouted it was impossible. Some cried out that he was insane. Yet no one could look away. Zalcor's eyes burned red. His claws snapped the armrest of his chair in half, splinters falling to the floor. He had never been humiliated this way. Not by any rival, not by any alien, and certainly not by a human. His roar filled the hall. 30,000! The number shook the air. The lamps flickered. The crowd erupted in wild cheers. They thought it was finished. No one could rise above that. The human's chest heaved, his body swayed, his face pale. He looked at the pile before him, empty, stripped, bare. Then he turned his gaze to the sisters, their wide eyes filled with tears and hope. His voice came out soft at first, then grew strong. "All of me, all my blood, all my days, I give it." 31,000. Silence, not a whisper, not a breath. The hall froze. Even Zalcor's fury stopped in its tracks. For the first time, his grin fell completely, his eyes narrowed, his chest heaved. He had been challenged, and worse, he had been beaten. The auctioneer trembled, his cane lifted high, his voice rang out. "Sold!" The little sisters sold together to the human. The hall erupted. Some cheered, some screamed, some cursed. The sound was deafening. The sisters cried out, joy breaking through their tears. They rushed forward as the guards opened their cage, throwing themselves into the human's arms. There, small bodies clung to him like he was the only safe place in the universe. Zalcor stood frozen. His claws dug into the splintered wood, his breath heavy, his grin gone, his eyes filled with rage that burned hotter than fire. Slowly he whispered, his voice low, promising, "This is not over." And the human knew it. Even as he held the sisters close, even as victory burned bright in his chest, he knew this night had only begun. The final bid had been made, but the true price of defiance was still waiting. The cane struck the floor with a final crack. The auctioneer's trembling voice echoed, "Sold. Sold to the human." The hall erupted into chaos. Some voices cheered wildly, others screamed in rage. A few shouted curses at the human, while others whispered in awe. Never in the history of this place had anyone dared to defy Zalcor, much less win against him. The two little sisters ran forward the moment the cage door swung open. Their bare feet slapped against the wooden floor as they stumbled. Their tiny arms wrapped around the human's legs. Their voices broke into sobs. "You saved us. You saved us," they cried. Their faces pressed into his clothes, their bodies shaking with relief. The human bent down, his tired hands trembling. He gathered them into his arms, his chest heaved, his body weak from the battle of bids, but his embrace was strong. He held them close, feeling the warmth of their fragile bodies against his. For the first time that night, his lips curved into a faint smile. But around them, the hall was still full of shadows. Zalcor had not moved. He stood near his broken chair, his claws pressed into the splintered wood. His grin was gone, replaced with something colder, darker. His eyes glowed with fury. His tail lashed once against the floor, cracking the boards beneath. The human met his gaze. His heart pounded. He could feel the weight of the alien's promise, the silent vow of vengeance Zalcor would not forget. He would not forgive. The auctioneer wiped sweat from his brow. He forced his voice to rise, trying to calm the storm. It is done. The rules have been honored. The younglings belong to the human. But even he looked afraid. His eyes flicked nervously toward Zalcor, knowing this victory might ignite something far worse. The crowd slowly broke apart. Some hurried out, eager to escape before blood was spilled. Others lingered, whispering excitedly, retelling what they had seen. A few bowed their heads in respect to the human as he passed, but most only watched from the shadows, fearful of what Zalcor might do next. The sisters refused to let go. Their hands clung to his shirt, their tiny faces buried in his chest. "Please don't leave us, please don't let him take us," they begged. He placed a hand gently on their heads, his voice low but firm. "I won't, I promise." Every step toward the exit felt heavy. The human's boots echoed on the boards. The sisters in his arms made him strong, but his body was weary, his mind sharp. He knew Zalcor's eyes followed him with every step. As he neared the door, Zalcor's voice rolled through the hall, low and cruel. "Human!" The word stopped him. He turned slightly, meeting the alien's gaze. The crowd froze again, holding its breath. Zalcor's jagged teeth glistened as his grin slowly returned. "Enjoy your little victory. Enjoy your pets." His claws scraped the wood, leaving long scars. "But remember this. No human leaves my city untouched. I will find you. I will take back what you stole, and I will make you crawl before me." The sisters whimpered. Their small hands clutched tighter at the human. Their hearts pounded with terror. The human's face hardened. He did not shout. He did not curse. He only nodded once, his voice steady. "Try." Gasps ran through the hall. The human turned his back and pushed the doors open. The golden light of the auction hall spilled into the cold night outside. He stepped out, the sisters still clinging to him. The streets were nearly empty. A thin fog rolled across the stone path. The city outside was filled with towers and glowing lamps, but the silence of the night pressed close. The human's boots echoed softly as he carried the children away from the hall. Every shadow felt like a threat, every corner like a waiting blade. The sisters whispered, "Are we safe now?" Their voices were tiny, hopeful. The human adjusted them in his arms, his chest heavy, his voice quiet but strong. "Not yet, but soon." Behind them, the auction hall doors closed with a heavy thud. The noise rolled across the street like thunder. The human knew it was not an ending. It was only the beginning. But as he walked, as the sisters clung to him, he felt something stir inside his chest. Stronger than fear, stronger than exhaustion. It was the knowledge that he had kept his promise. He had defied the strongest, the richest, the cruelest, and still he had won. The sisters, once trembling and broken, now breathed softly against him, their tears still wet, but mixed with faint smiles. They whispered, "Thank you." Their voices, so small, yet they pierced the darkness around them. The human walked on, the cold night wind biting at his skin. Zalcor's threat still echoed in his ears. But his arms were full, his heart steady, and for the first time in many years he felt like his struggle had meaning. The victory was his, but the danger was only beginning. In the shadows of the city, Zalcor's fury was already moving, and the price of defiance had yet to be paid. The night air outside the auction hall was cold. The human walked slowly through the misty streets, the two little sisters clinging to him as if letting go meant losing each other forever. Their small faces pressed into his chest, their tears still wet. But now their sobs had softened into whispers. "You saved us," one whispered, her voice trembling. "He can't take us now, right?" The human steps did not falter. His eyes scanned every shadow, every alley. He knew Zalkor's threat was not empty. He knew the ruthless alien had power, wealth, soldiers, spies. To defy him meant to carry his mark forever. Still, he held, the sisters tighter, his voice low but steady. "I won't let him. You're safe with me." The city seemed to breathe around them. Towering spires glowed with alien lights. Guards patrolled distant streets, and whispers of the auction spread like fire. By dawn, everyone would know. A human had stood against Zalkor and won. But victory carried a heavy price. The human's body ached, his pouch empty, his belongings gone. His life itself now a debt placed on the edge of a blade. He could feel eyes watching from the rooftops, shadows moving where none should move. The sisters clutched his shirt. "Don't let him find us." They whispered again and again, their small voices cut through him. He knew Zalkor would come, not tonight perhaps, but soon. And when he came, it would not only be for the sisters, it would be for revenge. They reached the edge of the city where the fog grew thicker. The human paused near an old transport station, its metal walls rusted, its lights flickering. He lowered the sisters to the ground for the first time. They stood close together, holding each other's hands, never breaking the bond. The human knelt before them, his voice soft. "From now on, you don't face the world alone. You're together, and you have me." The sisters nodded, tears still, running down their cheeks, but for the first time their eyes shone with hope instead of fear. One of them whispered, "Why? Why would you fight for us? You didn't even know us." The human's gaze softened. He thought of his own past, of family he had lost, of bonds broken by greed and cruelty. He thought of the soldier's tag he had placed on the auction table, the memory of a brother who once told him never to let the innocent be taken. His voice was heavy, because no one should lose the only family they have left. The sisters leaned into him, their tiny arms wrapping around his neck. "We'll stay with you," they promised. "We'll never let go." In that moment, the human felt the weight of his choice. He had gained something worth more than coin, more than freedom. He had gained trust, family, and the promise of tomorrow. But the price of defiance hung heavy. In the night, in the distance beyond the fog, the sound of boots echoed faintly. Shadows moved along the rooftops. A message had already been sent. Zalkor's men were searching. The human rose, taking the sisters' hands in his voice calm. "We need to leave this city tonight." The sisters nodded quickly, their eyes wide but full of belief. They did not ask where, they did not ask how, they only trusted him together. They slipped into the dark streets, moving quickly. The human's heart pounded with every step, but his resolve was unshaken. He knew he had made enemies. He knew blood would be spilled for what he had done. But he also knew this: Zalkor could not scare him into surrender. The fog swallowed them as they left the glowing towers behind. The sisters walked at his side, small hands gripping his tightly, their steps uncertain, but determined. The human's shadow stretched long across the stone path, carrying not just his own weight, but the weight of the future he had chosen. Behind them, the auction hall stood like a golden wound in the heart of the city. Inside, Zalkor's fury still boiled. His claws tore through wood. His voice roared, promises of vengeance. "Find him," he hissed to his men. "Find him and bring me their screams." But outside, in the cold night, the human walked on. His chest heavy, his arms weary, yet his spirit unbroken. He had kept the sisters together, and for that he would fight as long as he lived. The night stretched ahead, uncertain, dangerous. The path would not be easy. The price of defiance was not paid in a single night. It would follow him, chase him, threaten him, but as the sisters leaned against him, whispering softly, "We're not afraid anymore. We're with you," he felt a strength greater than fear, greater than vengeance. And so the human walked into the unknown not as a man with nothing left, but as a protector with everything to fight for. The price of defiance was heavy, but the reward was greater. For in a galaxy ruled by cruelty, one human had chosen hope, one human had chosen family. And that choice would echo far beyond the auction hall.